Hey guys, what's up? It's Debbie, and I am back with more true crimes of criminal minds. If you're new to my channel, welcome. What I do is I talk about a true crime case that is either mentioned in a Criminal Minds episode, is similar to the episode, or sometimes the episode is actually based on the true crime. And that is what I'm talking about today. Season 2, Episode 8, and the episode is called Empty Planet. Welcome back. If you're not new, I appreciate you, I love you, and I'm glad that you're here. So let's go ahead and get started. In this episode, someone is planting bombs all over Seattle. And they have a manifesto that they have called into the media saying that they will quit planting bombs when his manifesto gets published. He is trying to stop all technology. He believes that you should just live off the land, off the grid, and that is exactly what Ted Kaczynski did, otherwise known as the Unabomber. I love this episode. It's one of my favorites, mainly because JoBeth Williams is in it, and she was the mom on Poltergeist, and she does such a good job in this episode. The Unabomber was a serial bomber that committed his crimes from 1978 to 1995. He mailed homemade bombs around the country, 16 over a 17-year period, causing 3 deaths and injuring 23 people. The first bomb was mailed to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois on May 26, 1978. It was addressed to Buckley Christ, a professor of material engineering. It was a suspicious package, so it was opened by a campus police officer whose name was Terry Marker. He was burned and received shrapnel wounds but survived. Now, these bombs, I'm going to talk about this a little later, but these bombs had junk in them. Anything he thought he could use for shrapnel. Everything he could use for shrapnel, he would put in the bombs. So it's going to sound like I'm repeating myself, but most of these people, that's the majority of their injuries is shrapnel wounds. So I'm not losing it. It's just that it happened over and over and over again. Not quite a year later, on May 9th, 1979, another bomb was sent to Northwestern University. This time, it was opened by a graduate student named John Harris. He received burns around his eyes and shrapnel wounds. On November 15th, 1979, a bomb was placed in the cargo hold of American Airlines Flight 444, flying from Chicago to Washington, D.C. The first 2 bombs were scary enough, but if this ever happened to me or happened on a plane I was on, I would never get back on another plane as long as I lived. It had an altimeter switch in it, so when they got to a certain height, it was supposed to explode. But it didn't explode, it just caught on fire, and the cabin of the plane filled with smoke. 12 people suffered smoke inhalation, and the plane landed safely at Dulles International. The next bombing was June 15, 1980. Percy Wood, who was the president of United Airlines at the time, was mailed a suspicious package. He only received cuts and burns. The authorities now believe that there is a serial bomber at work. Janet Reno, who was the Attorney General, asked that a task force be formed to find him. The FBI, ATF, and the Postal Service got together and developed a task force that they named Unabomb. UN for university, A for airlines, and bomb for bomb. So they called it the Unabomb, but the media decided to start calling him the Unabomber. So the media came up with the name Unabomber. That's one thing that I've never understood. Why was he called the Unabomber? Because Una usually means 1, and he did 16. But it's completely different. UN for university, A for airline. Former special agent in charge, Terry Turchie, stated that It was as close to an unsolvable case as a case can be. They studied the remnants of the bombs and discovered that they were homemade with lots of shrapnel inside. Things like wood, tree bark, nails, razor blades, anything that could make it more lethal, more dangerous. That's what he wanted. The FBI referred to him as the junkyard bomber because of all the trash that was in the bomb that was used for shrapnel. I like the term junkyard bomber better than Unabomber, but at the same time, it kind of sounds like he bombed junkyards. So maybe that's not a very good descriptive name. The fifth bomb was sent to Leroy Wood Pearson at the University of Utah. You're going to see as we go along, it's really strange, but there was just something about the word wood. He liked wood. He put woods in the bombs. A couple of his victims were named Wood. He made up fake addresses with a lot of woods in it. And he lived out in the woods, so this guy liked the woods. Luckily, this bomb was defused before it could detonate and harm anybody. On May 5th, 1982, in Nashville, the head of the computer science department at Vanderbilt University, Patrick Fisher, received a package that was opened by his secretary, Janet Smith. She was burned and received shrapnel wounds, but survived. May 5th, 1982, there was another package mailed to an engineering professor at the University of California, Berkeley. And I love this man's name. I think it's Greek, it's beautiful, and I hope I don't butcher it. Diogenes Angelikos. He received burns and shrapnel wounds. And thank goodness this man did not die, because he saves the life of another victim. Theodore Ted Kaczynski was born on May 22nd, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. He had a younger brother named David. Ted was a child prodigy with an affinity for math. He had an IQ of 167. He was bullied by the older kids and he didn't fit in. But it didn't help that he skipped 6th and 11th grade and he got into Harvard when he was 16 on a full scholarship. If you guys have watched some of my other videos, it really works on a kid's psyche when they're either set back grades or when they jump ahead, because it's not just about education, it's about socialization as well. And if you're a small child and then you keep skipping grades in school and end up with older kids, and then you go to college where you're still a kid and you're with a bunch of adults, basically, that's going to affect you, and not in a good way. At the time, there were experiments being done by Dr. Henry Murray. It was supposed to be a personality study for undergrads. They were told to write an essay about their beliefs, what they thought about things, how they saw the world, and then they turned those essays in supposedly to have their personality studied. But unknown to the students, the essays were then read and used to mock them and ridicule them. So they were having all their core beliefs that they were being told to write in an essay used against them. So everything they believed, then they had people that would come to them and say, no, that's not right, that's wrong, this is why do you believe this? And just challenged everything that they wrote in that essay to break them down. The most vulnerable students were picked for the experiment, and Ted was absolutely vulnerable because he was 16, 17 years old around all these adults, and he just didn't fit in, and he didn't have a support group. Dr. Murray worked for the OSS in World War II, and he's also believed to be part of the MK testing. It's rumored that the students were also part of MK testing, but it's just a rumor. But I happen to believe it. I've seen it on many documentaries where it didn't say it was a rumor. It said it was confirmed that it was MK. So I think it was MK. So government, don't come after me. Ted denied that the experiments had anything to do with his actions. And I tend to believe that because later he gets diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. For those of you who don't know what the OSS is, If you've seen Captain America or Agent Carter, OSS was who Agent Carter worked for. It was an Army intelligence agency, and it was called Office of Strategic Services. It only lasted 3 years and 3 months, and it was the precursor of our modern Central Intelligence Agency. So basically, the CIA. And for those of you too young to remember MK Ultra, MK Ultra was an illegal human experiment done by the CIA. It was designed to identify drugs to weaken subjects during interrogation. Participants were given LSD. Sometimes they didn't know, sometimes without their knowledge. And they're just sitting there and the walls are melting and they're going, what the heck is happening? They were also hypnotized, subjected to sensory deprivation, isolation, SA, verbal abuse, and torture. And some people died. I love this. I love when pop culture meets history. So if you watch Stranger Things, the experiments that are done on 11, and why 11 has her powers, there's a book called Suspicious Minds, I think. And it's like a prequel to Stranger Things. And 11's mom was part of MK Ultra when she was in college, and she was pregnant with 11 at the time. And that's why 11 has her powers. So Stranger Things is about MK Ultra at the beginning. I'm not caught up. I've only watched the first 2 seasons, but anyway. And there's another movie. William Hurt was in it. It's a 1980 movie. It's called Altered States. I have seen it, but a very long time ago, so I don't really remember. I remember him being in the deprivation chamber where he's just like, he's got electrodes plugged up to his head and he's laying in water in this thing and he's just like, and it's dark and there's no sound. But it's a very good movie if you can find it. I don't even know where to watch it anymore. I might have to give it a rewatch. And while I was researching this, I fell down an MK Ultra rabbit hole. So later in the week, I'm going to try to do a video on MK Ultra. So make sure you're subscribed and your notifications are on so you know when I come out with that episode. Ted graduated from Harvard in 1962. And then he went to the University of Michigan and he got a master's degree and a doctorate degree in math. I am not a math person. How do you get a doctorate degree in math? Is there like special math that only doctors know? I don't understand. I have questions. He became a math teacher at Berkeley for 2 years. And then in 1969, he just resigned. No reason. Just, I'm done. I don't want to be a teacher anymore. Then he moved back in with his parents in Lombard, Illinois. And then he started construction on a 10 by 13 cabin in Lincoln, Montana. I would get claustrophobic if I was in a 10 by 13 box, basically. This is where he made all of his bombs and planned out everything. The authorities couldn't connect the victims, and after the bombing at Berkeley, he was dormant for 3 years. And during those 3 years, he used them to make his bombs more dangerous because he was upset because his bombs were not fatal. And he wanted to perfect the process, and he ended up making more sophisticated bombs. On May 15th, 1985, another bomb was mailed to Berkeley. John Hauser, a captain in the Air Force, this poor man wanted to be an astronaut. I feel so bad for this guy. Imagine if some madman did something that would just right then cut off all the dreams you ever have. The bomb was left in a computer room on the campus, and when it exploded, he lost 4 fingers, partial vision in his left eye, and almost lost his arm. And Diogenes Angelikos used his belt to make a tourniquet around the injured arm so that he would not bleed to death. So he survived. On June 13th, 1985, a bomb was mailed to the Boeing company, but it was reported defused. In Ann Arbor, Michigan, on November 15th, 1985, a bomb was mailed to the home of a University of Michigan professor. It was opened by his assistant, Niklaus Swino, who received burns and shrapnel wounds. The professor experienced hearing loss. On December 11th, 1985, in Sacramento, a bomb was found at a computer rental store. This would be the first fatality. 38-year-old store owner Hugh Scruton found a bag behind the store containing a bomb and was killed. Ted has now started using countermeasures. Remember I said he had an IQ of 167? The first case to be solved with DNA evidence was in the 80s. I want to say 86. And he would go into public bathrooms and collect hair off the floor of the bathroom to put in the bombs so that DNA testing might not come back to him. At least it would come back to those unsuspecting people. He stamped the letters FC on the bomb, which stood for Freedom Club. He would send letters to the FBI with fake return addresses so they couldn't find him. Here's one. Remember what I said about Wood? Frederick Benjamin Isaac Wood, 549 Wood Street, Woodlake, California. He liked wood. The guy loved wood. He was like a tree hugger, man. He loved wood. The police got their first break on February 20th, 1987. In Salt Lake City, Utah, Gary Wright pulled up to the computer store that he owned and noticed a package under the tire of a coworker's car. Gary went to move it and it exploded, causing nerve damage in his arm but not killing him. This time, a witness had seen the package being placed and gave the police a composite sketch. Not during this research, but in documentaries that I have seen in the past about the Unabomber, I have heard that it's not actually a sketch of the Unabomber. It's a sketch of a delivery guy that somebody saw. But I have no idea if that's true. So I'm not going to say that it's fact, but if anybody does know and could clear it up for me, please let me know down in the comments. I would really appreciate it because that's something I would really want to know if it's just a rumor or if it's real. Now, after this bomb, he was dormant for 6 years. Plenty of time to sophisticate his bombs and make them more deadly. The bombing started back up on June 22nd, 1993 in Tiburon, California. The bomb was addressed to Dr. Charles Epstein, who was a geneticist. The bomb was sent to him at the University of California, San Francisco, and he lost some of his fingers when it detonated, but he survived. On June 24th, 1993, Ted sent a bomb to a computer science professor at Yale, David Galertner. He was severely injured, losing vision in one eye and hearing in one ear and a portion of his right hand. The Unabomber's second fatality occurred on December 10th, 1994 in North Caldwell, New Jersey. Thomas Mosser was an ad executive that Ted mistakenly believed had helped Exxon clean up its image after a massive oil spill occurred. The Unabomber's final bomb was on April 24th, 1995, and it's his third fatality. In Sacramento, California, president of the California Forest Association, a lobbying group, was killed when a bomb was sent to him addressed to his predecessor. So that bomb didn't even go to the right person. This poor guy died for nothing. Well, they all died for nothing, but wrong target. Ted wrote a 35,000-word manifesto called Industrial Industry and Its Future. I did not read it. I don't plan on reading 35,000 words of a madman's writing, but if you want me to, I will read it and give you a condensed version. Let me know down in the comments if you would be interested in knowing what his manifesto said. He wrote letters to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Penthouse for some reason. He told them he would stop the bombings if they would print his manifesto. The Washington Post published it on September 19, 1995. His manifesto was a social critique opposing industrialism, rejecting leftism, and advocating for a nature-centered form of anarchism. So basically the Wild West. The FBI was at odds when trying to devise a profile of the bomber. Now, before I talk about this, just let me say I believe in behavioral analysis and I believe in the profiles that they come up with. A lot of times I don't understand how they get where they get. And in this case, they don't get anywhere. But this is what they said. They had two theories. So it could be either one of these, and it ended up being neither. But two theories. He was a male between the ages of 18 and 22, a college student with physics and engineering education, and he was upper middle class. Or two, he was in his 20s, lived with his mom in Chicago, had a white-collar job, took good care of his car, and was neat and clean. In reality, he was educated in math, in his 40s, broke, didn't have a car, lived alone, and when they arrested him, he was covered in soot. Now, he lived in this little 10 by 13 cabin, and he made a campfire outside, and he hunted small animals like rabbits, quail. I was raised in the country. My daddy grew up on a farm. My dad would pretty much eat anything. I have seen him, I don't even want to talk about what I've seen him cook. Anyway, that is what Ted Kaczynski did, living out in the boonies all by himself. He didn't have a job. He didn't have any money. I don't know how he was able to get money to buy the things like to make bombs and, like staples and stuff that he might need to supplement his wild diet. There was no electricity, no running water. He had a cot, bookshelf, gas stove, I think he had a chair. For a bathroom, he dug a hole in the floor of the cabin. Yeah, gross. Pretty gross. He and his brother David were estranged because I guess because of all of his social problems, his not fitting in and being younger than all of his peers in school and whatever, he was really close to his brother David. And he got angry at David when David got married. And I think that the falling out probably had to do with jealousy, because I think he probably thought, oh, well, David's not going to have anything to do with me anymore. He has a wife and I'm not, I'm not important to him anymore. And so he didn't like that. He would occasionally write David letters. And this part breaks my heart because I get it. David said in an interview that one time he asked his mother why Ted was the way he was. Now, at the end of all my videos, I say, love your family and be kind to people. And this is partly why I say that. It sounds like a no-brainer, but if you don't get the right kind of socialization that you need, it screws you up. So his mom told him that when Ted was a baby, he was hospitalized for 9 months with a rash. Now, on the surface, that kind of sounds ridiculous. When I was a pediatric nurse, I took care of a little girl. I'm not sure how old she was, but she was like in the 3 to 6 year range. She was a little kid. And she had this horrible rash all over her body. She'd broken out in blisters. It then turned into scabs. And it's a very rare rash illness caused by a side effect of a medication. And not everybody has that side effect. The commercials where they're like, you can have this and this and this and this, but if this and this and this happens, go to your doctor, right? Like, the first set of side effects are kind of the ones that like everybody gets and they're not that severe. And then you have your more severe. So that's what it's called, Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And that's what it is. And this child was in the hospital for weeks. Not quite 9 months, but maybe 1 or 2. And I don't know that that's the rash that he had. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's not far-fetched to be hospitalized for a rash. Because I know how people are. They're going to go, he's in the hospital for a rash. What's up with that? But no, it's a legit thing. So he was in the hospital for 9 months. And his family was only allowed to visit him every other day for 2 hours. All the other time, he just had the hospital staff. Now, hospital staff is very good with children. but they're busy and they can't be at that bedside with that kid all the time. And we do get very attached to these kids. In fact, there was a kid I wanted to adopt because, baby, sweetest little boy, baby, oh my gosh. And his parents just dumped him, left him, never came back for him. I came that close. I almost adopted that kid. But there were other nurses that wanted to adopt him too. But they don't get the socialization and the love because their parents aren't at the bedside. The healthcare worker's at the bedside that is busy and has to go up, room to room to room to room to room to room. And they do bond with us though, but it's different. And then when they go back home to their family that they're not around, they have trouble adjusting. So I can see it happening. So after the Washington Post published the manifesto, the FBI was hoping that someone would read it and recognize the style of writing or like they published it just like it was. So like spelling errors or phrases or whatever, that someone would maybe recognize his writing. And someone did. That person was Linda Patrick, who was David Kaczynski's wife. And she convinced her husband to read it. And he, of course, it's his brother. He didn't want to admit that it was written by his brother. But he came to the realization that, I gotta tell the FBI, I can't keep holding this back. So he sent the FBI an essay that Ted had written in high school. David got the $1 million reward for turning him in. And part of that money was spent on legal fees. So I'm assuming David got a lawyer. Although it could have been for a lawyer for Ted. I don't know. I just know that part of the $1 million reward went to legal fees. I don't think I could take $1 million reward if I turned my brother in. I wouldn't want to have anything to do with that money. I'd give it to the victims. So then he told the FBI where Ted's cabin was. And so there was a scramble to get a search warrant for his cabin because they didn't want him to get tipped off. So now news that the FBI had a credible lead about Ted was leaked to the press. But the FBI asked that the press hold off for 24 hours so it wouldn't tip off Ted and they could catch him without any problems. So they used lifestyle and linguistic profiling in order to obtain a warrant. I love linguistic profiling, and I really wish I knew more about it. I love it on Criminal Minds. I don't remember the 2 seasons that Blake was in. She did a lot of linguistic profiling, and it was so interesting to me. I just loved it. 150 people were flown in to descend on the cabin, which they did on April 2nd, 1996. They even found a live bomb under his bed. And he had plans to set more bombs. So he wasn't done. And I don't know if the bomb under the bed was like his exit strategy to like commit suicide if he was caught. But at any rate, he didn't do that. But there was a live bomb under his bed. They found 30,000 pages of handwritten notes lined up in notebooks on the bookshelf. But remember, I said Ted had an IQ of 167. He wrote them all in code, and nobody has been able to crack it to this day. So they arrested Ted at his cabin, and he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. His lawyers wanted to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, but Ted said, "No, I am not insane. I am not going to say that." Then the trial started, and Ted stood up and told the judge he wanted to fire his lawyers and represent himself, which is not a good thing to do. That usually does not end up winning your case. But the judge denied it, and Ted got back to his cell, and he tried to hang himself with a pair of underwear. So then he was hospitalized, and at the hospital he received another psych eval, and it agreed with the first. His lawyers wanted him to undergo an extensive mental health exam, and Ted refused to do that. He refused to believe he was mentally ill, and he didn't want anyone to say that he was mentally ill. So in order not to be labeled insane, Ted pleaded guilty. That took the death penalty off the table, and he was given 4 life sentences. He was sent to the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, but in his older years, he was transferred to FMC Butner in Durham, North Carolina. And that's a prison like hospital, like people with special needs. And Ted did contract cancer, so that's probably why they transferred him there. He was found unresponsive in his cell on June 10th, 2023. It is suspected that he committed suicide, but the cause of death has not been released. He was 81 years old. So, I don't know if he committed suicide. The man had cancer. So, they just found him unresponsive. Doesn't really mean he committed suicide. So, I don't know why they think that. And like I said, the cause of death has not been released yet. And this was only in June, so it's pretty recent. David, his brother David, who received the $1 million reward, he donated the rest of the money to the victims after he paid the legal fees. There was an auction of Ted's belongings, and it raised $232,000, and that was donated to the victims. Why do people like to buy serial killer memorabilia? I don't get that. It's creepy. I mean, if you're into that, that's fine. I just personally think it's creepy. Gary Wright, the owner of the Salt Lake City computer store, became good friends with David Kaczynski, and now they go around speaking out against the death penalty and also to promote mental health awareness. Ted's cabin was moved, and it was bought by the museum in Washington, D.C. The museum closed down in 2019 because of financial problems, and then the cabin was taken apart and was sent to the FBI building where it was reassembled, and now you can see it on the FBI tour. But there's a lot of red tape to getting into the FBI tour. You have to email your congressperson to get permission, and they have to do a background check on you, which I understand. I'm just saying, can they have put it in the Smithsonian or something that's a little easier access to? But if you're really chomping at the bit to see this cabin, there's a VR experience, and it only costs $5. You can actually see his cabin and all his stuff and interact with stuff. I've not done it yet, but knowing me, I probably will one day. If it comes out for PlayStation. I don't have a computer VR. I just have PlayStation VR. It's only $5, and it's made by, I don't know if it's Viveport, Viveport, I'm not sure. Something like that. So I think that's enough for you to Google it. Because I don't remember the name of the company. But anyway. So that is the story of the reign of terror of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. I hope you have learned something, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Until I see you again, remember, be kind to people, love your family, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Don't forget to subscribe!